Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Art Clinic online this beautiful Saturday morning. We're here with Elaine Wilson, who recently was the Bethesda Painting Award winner. So I got to go up and see her work in person for that incredible show that happened earlier this year. And before we get to her, I want to say that thank you to Matt Klos for inviting our artist this week. If you didn't get a chance to see Matt's last talk, uh, hosted by Aaron Radicke, who is going to be our visiting artist in the Stone Tower second floor. Our opening reception for her is going to be October 3rd from 6 to 8 p.m. So it's kind of coming together really nice. But you can check out Matt's recording from his artist talk at the ACO. You should just go to the ACO webpage and then scroll down. Everything's nice and alphabetical at this point. So really a fun, exciting talk with lots of images. But I really admire Matt's painting, so I'm always curious to kind of see who the artist introduces next. So without further ado, I'd love to hear more about Elaine Wilson, Matt. Thanks.
Thanks, Jordan. I think it's wonderful, this collection of artists that you're putting together kind of on the web. It's just great to see and hear from all these folks. Elaine Wilson is a great painter, an educator, an intellectual that I had the pleasure of meeting quite a long time ago now. I assembled a show, A Lineage of American Perceptual Painters at St. John's College in the Mitchell Gallery. And there were a number of people that were included in this, and Elaine came out for the panel discussion and had a fantastic talk with her afterwards. We've been friends and acquaintances ever since. She's been a huge supporter of a gallery project that I had going for a while and my own work. And I've seen some of her shows. I was down in DC to see a show a while ago. Elaine is a Yalie, who, always the best, the brightest, the most beautiful. She went through Yale in 1983. Got her BFA at Washington University in St. Louis School of Art, which was kind of a hotbed of art education at the time. A number of painters that I love went through that school. She was a winner of the Elizabeth Greenshields grant, which, if you don't know, that's an incredibly prestigious, very difficult grant to win, designated for representational painters. And very recently, you already know this, she won the Bethesda Painting Awards and is actually just sort of seeing a lot of, in my opinion, incredible success just in the last couple of years that's well warranted and well deserved. So, Elaine, thanks for agreeing to speak.
Well, thank you, Matt. That's a thank you. As I recall that exhibition that I went to, I'm not certain how I found out about it, but when I saw that you had selected a Gwen John, to include in that show, I thought, okay, I got to go because I am a big, big fan of Gwen John. So I am going to just start right in because I have to say I've selected a lot of different images here. Here we go. So here's my lecture. I'm going back in time to down to back to Michigan. I moved to the DMV in 2012. And for the previous 20 years, I had been living and working in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My studio was in a little town just west of Ann Arbor called Dexter. And the very first thing when I moved, right before I had moved to Ann Arbor from New Haven, Connecticut, where I'd lived for 10 years, I had been painting oil storage tanks. I have always been a plein air painter. I've always painted outside on site. It's where I come alive. When I left New Haven, I had planned to paint a very large painting of the oil storage tanks that I had been working with for maybe 5 or 6 years. And I was just on the cusp of making a big painting. And I was kind of crushed, actually, to move to the Midwest. I thought, what the hell am I going to paint? But I found a studio space in this little town, and the person who subleased the studio to me at the time said, "Oh, you should go check out this grain." He saw my work and he said, "Oh, you should go check out this grain elevator that's just up the road." And oh boy, did he have my number. So I started painting that grain elevator, and I painted that grain elevator for a good 8 years. So this was the first large painting I painted, the grain elevator. It's 2 feet high and 20 feet long. And the title of the painting is Around the Big H. It's on stretched canvas, and I had this bizarre, I created this, I don't know. I don't know how I made the stretcher frame. Oh, I think I commissioned the woodworker who had a shop next to my studio. It was a big industrial building. I leased 3,000 square feet that I then subleased small sections of to other artists. And in another of the spaces in that same big building was this woodworker, and I had him make me the 2 foot by 20 foot stretcher frame. And I painted tons of paintings outside, on site, in order to get this thing underway. When I had moved to when I moved to Ann Arbor, there was a period of about a year where I hardly painted. Well, partly I had little children. I was sort of in kind of mental crisis because I couldn't figure out how to paint without my groupies around me, all my friends from grad school who had hung around in New Haven, and we were kind of like a little group. I also couldn't figure out what I was going to do without my oil storage tanks. I also was a little bit in crisis because I couldn't get the voices from graduate school out of my head. You know, you should do this, you should do that, you should do it this way, you should do it that way. And I really had to kind of go back and figure out, who am I and what is it that I want? And what I've really realized is what was very important to me was the idea that my paintings would move people around in space. And I would also recognize that I was extremely tied to drawing, that drawing was really the root of everything. So with those two things in mind, I actually spent a year just drawing at the grain elevator and drawing it from every vantage point and trying to figure out how I could create something that was like a Chinese scroll that took you on a journey through the space. And so here at the far left, I'm going to go at the, what's my next slide? Next slide is, oh, how is it? I'm not getting, okay, here we go. Here we are at the left-hand side, and here at the far left, I actually painted 2 studies to paint this left section here. One study was at the grain elevator looking at puddles and mud and ruts, and the next was from down the road, this scene, and I just kind of seamed them together, putting the horizon there. And the conceit of my idea for moving in this landscape was that the horizon level changes as if you are moving your head up and down. So here you're looking straight down, and then here you're looking up and out. But by the time you move to the right and you've gotten to this grain storage bin, the horizon has dropped to here. And by the time you move to this grain storage bin, the horizon has moved to absolutely halfway down the painting. By the time you move into the center, the horizon is down here, stays down here. But by the time you move to the right, it's off the bottom of it and you're looking up. And then you're really craning your neck and looking way up over here. So as you move through and along this painting, which is in some ways paying homage to Piero della Francesca, my love for Piero and the big fresco painters of the Quattrocento fresco painters in Italy, but also equally my love for Chinese landscape scrolls. I'm kind of trying to just take you around in the landscape. For every section of this painting, there are paintings that I painted of the space, of the place in situ, that I then bring into the studio and put around me. I did a big, I have a 2 foot by 20 foot long, no, it's not 20, no, maybe it's a little smaller. Maybe it's more like 18 inches high, but however many, I did a drawing for this in ink in the studio on the floor, in ink wash. study for the whole painting. So, and I haven't looked at that thing in years. It's rolled up somewhere in my studio. So in my process is to make tons of drawings, tons of paintings out on site, then to make a big study of the whole thing in drawing, and then to paint the painting. And I think it took me a couple of years to paint. I think it took me 2 or 3 years. And the final completion on this is 1994. And I think I started painting the grain elevator in 92. So that's about 2 years it took me to kind of conceive and complete this thing. When I completed it, amazingly enough, I got a show at a gallery in Ann Arbor. Oh, one of the things I wanted to tell you about the color in this is color is very important for me. But one of the things that's kind of crazy about this painting is the Michigan is hot and humid in the summer. How do you convey hot and humid when you've got a cold color like the blue sky? Well, you do the crazy thing that everybody tells you shouldn't do, which is you put fat under lean instead of fat over lean. This whole section of the sky, I underpainted with cadmium orange. In other words, I just put an entire coat of cadmium orange over this probably like 5-foot section of the painting, waited for that to dry, which let me tell you, when you're waiting for cadmium orange to dry, you got a lot of other things you can do. Couple weeks. And then it's cobalt blue over the cadmium orange. So, and then guess what? I didn't like the sky. So I had to redo it and put cadmium orange back down over the cobalt blue and then so this painting, crazily enough, has a layer of cadmium, layer of cobalt, layer of cadmium, layer of cobalt. Nuts. Don't try to do this. I went to look at the painting a year or two ago, and it's pretty insane. The cadmium is really coming through. It's looking hotter and hotter every day. Anyway, I just wanted to say, if anyone has a question, just break in. Just say, Elaine.
Is it gonna crack?
What?
Is it gonna crack?
The interesting thing about this is when you're trying to move a 20-foot long painting, it's likely that the thing is going to crack somewhere, just through moving it around. And at oh my God, at one point, there's so many stories about what's happened to this painting. What I had, the stretcher frame actually comes apart in the middle, so that my idea was to move it. I would take it, open up that stretcher bar, and then kind of bend the thing and use like a big concrete core cylinder thing in the center I'm just going to show you the whole thing again. So it comes apart here, so that then I would bend it so that I could actually put it in like a van and move it. Well, damn, the whole thing cracked at the top and the bottom right here. And I had to, oh God, it was kind of awful. When I got it to the gallery, I had to kind of repaint the top and the bottom part because they had cracked. I had to kind of like fix it. And then from that gallery show, the painting was then the president of the University of Michigan, his wife was one of my gallery mates. Jean Magnano Bollinger was my studio mate, and her husband Lee Bollinger was the president of the university at the time, and he wanted the painting for the president's office. And so to move it to the president's office, to get it into the office, we had to kind of take it up an elevator shaft. Just moving the whole damn thing, it was just incredible. So once I got it to the office, of course, I had to repaint it again. And he basically was on loan to the president's office until I had to buy someone who wanted to buy it. And then he bought it for the university. He said, no, I'm buying it. And he got the Regents to purchase it. Well, what's interesting about having finished this painting was just arduous. I kind of thought it was wonderful. People really thought it was interesting. I'm lying in bed thinking, what the heck, before anyone had expressed any interest in buying it, I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to do with this thing? And I thought, but wait a minute, I have this idea for another one. Actually, I have an idea for two, because what I've done is sort of moved you in space, but I thought, I want to move you in time. I want to move you in space and in time. And because by then I had been, I just would go back to the beginning of the painting. This is wheat growing in a field. It's been planted in the fall. It's the first thing that comes up in the spring. So winter, if you don't know anything about the life cycle of wheat, in the northern, most of the United States, what we're planting is winter wheat, which is planted in the fall. It dies back, just like a grass. It dies back in the winter. Then it comes up really early in the spring, and that allows it to get enough moisture. And then it's harvested in June. And so but I just thought that this whole life cycle of wheat was really interesting, and I could cover, because it's really something going on in the field almost every month of the year, that I could base a sort of painting in time about a year around this. So I had this idea that I would paint a painting about the whole life cycle of wheat. And then I realized I can't do it in just one painting. I got to do it in two paintings. So here you're looking at, this is called, previous one is about the grain elevator. This one is called Wheat in Spring and Summer, the Altruistic Sun. And I painted another painting, also 20 feet long, Wheat in Fall and Winter. The sun will shine no more than is strictly necessary. These sort of subtitles, the Altruistic Sun and the sun will shine no more than is strictly necessary, are quotes from poems by Jane Kenyon, who I can, this is a whole nother lecture on how I've been influenced by poets. So what was crazy about this, I'm lying in bed at night thinking, damn, who's going to buy a 2 foot by 20 foot painting? What the hell am I going to do with this thing? I did have a big studio. I had 3 20-foot long walls in my studio. I had a really big studio. So I knew I had a space to paint the things, but I didn't know what the hell I was going to do when I was done with them. But I thought, I got to do this. Got this idea. And so it's interesting that Lee Bollinger took the first big one off my hands pretty quickly and put it in the president's office. So I started to paint these other two. And here's an image of when I was pretty nearly done with painting the two paintings in I guess it must have been about 1999. 1999, this show was mounted at the University of Michigan Museum of Art, and the show was called Seeing It Through, and it was faculty artists from the University of Michigan School of Art and their process. And boy, did I actually fit right in with this, even though everybody else who was in the show was a full-time faculty. I was the only adjunct faculty in the show. But largely it was because I had a great process. I mean, my process was so visible. I had so many drawings. This sawhorses in case here is full of drawings and color studies that I did. The curators came to my studio to look at my work, and they saw the painting, and they saw that I had all of these studies mounted on the wall up above, which is how I worked. I would put the canvas up, and then I'd have all my studies around me. Sometimes I'd take one and put it on an easel near me so I could really refer to it. But this is, a group of the studies that I had done. You can see that here, for this section of the painting, I had painted 2 different studies, one on a cloudy day and one on a sort of sunnier day, to see what went at this side. Here's the field that I chose. And a lot of it had to do with, finding different fields out in the landscape. And this this is actually a fairly small silo, but it was brand new. When I found that silo, it was on a pig farm. Oh, it's not a farm, actually, they grew everything, but this was a little silo right next to their little pig barn. And oh boy, that silo was so shiny and so reflective, it was like a mirror. And I'll talk more about how important reflectivity is to me. So just looking at that was kind of insane. And finding all of these fields, just finding all of these places. This hay field, which is in here, this is the last year that this very old man, he's in his 90s by the time he was cutting that hay. That was the last year that field had hay in it. The next year they were building a subdivision on it. It was kind of a pay-in to the disappearing agrarian landscape around in eastern Michigan. And this grain elevator here was one that I had painted quite a bit before in other paintings earlier. This is jump in.
Just to ask about that, because of the fascination that you've had with the grain silos and grain elevators. but also the appreciation for like the sense of time in your work. Did
Uh-huh.
this come from an appreciation of farming, or like, could you speak to a little of where that
Oh
understanding
God,
of, because the
the
time is
this
fascinating.
yeah, yeah, it is. And I'll tell you, I had no idea. I'm a suburban girl. I grew up in suburban Boston. What do I know about farming? Zip. I know nothing. But here I have moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which when I got there after having lived in New Haven, Connecticut, I thought I'm dying of the bucolic plague here. It's so beautiful. It's so pretty. There's nothing to paint. What the hell do I do with this? And I don't know what to do with it. I needed grunge. I hated painting trees. Anytime I chose anything that had anything green in it, it had to be pruned into a cube or a sphere. I liked shrubs, you know, but but because I liked the geometric shape. And so I actually really had to kind of buckle down and say, I got to figure out how to paint this place. I got to figure out what's here. And when you're painting at a grain elevator, you're driving through farmland to get to the grain elevator. And then you're seeing the farmland and you're seeing the farmers and you're talking to the farmers and you're learning about what's going on. So I just had to plunge myself into it. I had to figure out how to paint this green stuff. I had to figure out how to paint dirt. I have whole paintings that are nothing but a plowed field with nothing in it but the dirt. Um,
It's
I
there's
have,
there's a phrase that makes me think of this like farming is a clock read in colors, and it's clear in your work how you're seeing those colors, and over time, obviously, it's being captured in the way that you're on site to observe it all. So it's
yeah,
a amazing sense of that time in
it's
those colors.
inescapable. I think if you don't, I mean, basically, I just realized that here's where I was, and I had to plunge into it, and I had to teach myself what I needed to know in order to do this. This painting is the wheat in fall and winter, and the subtitle, the sun will shine no more than is strictly necessary, is really a reference to how cloudy and gray Michigan, central lower Michigan is in the winter. It is from November until the end of February. It is gray, gray, gray. And the moments that the sun bursts through are like, oh my God, you grab for them because it is seriously a dark, gloomy place in the winter. It's not necessarily a lot of snow. And one of the things that happened, Ricky, is that I got to understand who the farmers. This is this I can I for the life of me I can't remember his name now, but I knew his name. Here is the wheat field being planted. This down in here, there's the tractor with the farmer driving it, and his wife is riding behind him. She's holding. These people are in their 80s. She is holding onto his shoulders, riding behind him, standing on the back. Her job is to keep turning and looking at the grain drill, which is the thing that has the grain in it behind, and check and make sure it's really working. And check and make sure there's no problem. I mean, this is a husband and wife in their late stage of their life, out there doing their thing. This is October. They're planting their wheat. I love that field. It's beautiful rolling hills on Waterloo Road. And here's the middle of the painting. And this little field on the far right where the sun is breaking through, that's the same field that's the big field in the earlier painting. But this is also this grain elevator that was brought in is, ways down the road. None of these places that I'm painting are located near each other. I'm taking chunks of Washtenaw County and kind of seaming them together. But I love this grain elevator. Was called when I first started painting it was called the Big H, and it had this fabulous sign with this weird thing. I adored the sign. And when it changed hands and they took the sign down, I asked them what they were going to do with the sign, and they said, "It's out back. You can have it if you want it." So I had that sign for a long time. I love that. Love that thing. Okay, so that's that's what was really extraordinary about it was in 1999 that was in that show with the summer painting, and the painting was purchased with all its studies by a private collector who took it to Florida to their retirement home, and it's still there in Boca Raton. They bought everything. And before someone who had seen the show was a buyer was the art consultant working to decorate a new building that Herman Miller, the furniture maker out in Zeeland, Michigan. It's out near west of Grand Rapids. They were building a new design facility for all their designers. And it the design facility looked like a farm silo. Anyway, she was buying art. She saw this show. She wanted a painting. And I said, well, I have another one. And she said, we'll buy it. So I hadn't even finished the winter one. She bought it sight unseen for them. And I said, well, I'm not finished with it. She said, I trust you. Herman Miller, when they bought it, when they took it out to Zeeland, they sent one of their they have the most beautiful trucks, semi trucks. They sent this incredible semi truck to my studio, and they loaded the thing in it. And the guy, oh boy, with a truck driver that looked like the Marlboro Man off those Marlboro Man ads. I mean, oh my God, it was kind of an experience just having them come collect the painting. And I've been out to see this. They bought 5 paintings of mine, and I went out to see them in their design facility. It's a beautiful thing, beautiful space. So,
I mean, at any point did you just say 20 feet's rather long? Maybe I should break.
well, it's funny because I kept thinking, okay, so you're crazy to paint paintings that are 2 feet high and 20 feet long, but it's sort of like, I think that was a point where that movie, The Natural, that starred Robert Redford in it, came out. They said, if you build it, they will come. I kind of felt like that. You have a crazy idea, just go for it. And if you're enthusiastic about it, enough about it, someone will catch that enthusiasm and they'll buy it. Anyway, so jump a couple years. I spent some time painting in gravel pits. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't have any of those paintings just because there's just not space or time. But at around 2000, I found this farm, this dairy farm that was not terribly far from my studio, and I got real excited about painting there. And this painting I was working on September 11th, 2001. This is calves that have just gotten kind of out of their little holding pen, and they're just scampering around. But this is the interior of their sort of space where some of the calves are kept, where the calves are born, and it's attached to their dairy where they do the milking. I have always adored Peter Bruegel the first. And at that time, I had become kind of obsessed with this painting, The Fall of Icarus, which I had never seen. The Bruegel painting I knew was the one that's in the Detroit Institute of Art, Peasant Wedding, and the one at the Metropolitan, which is the beautiful part of his series of the seasons, which is the harvesting one. But I knew them in reproduction, and I was just adored it. And I spent a lot of time drawing from the reproduction of this painting, The Fall of Icarus. What I was really interested in was the idea that major events take place, major kind of life-altering events take place, and nobody really notices. And so on September 11th, I'm out painting in the dairy barn, and my husband calls me on the phone. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. He calls me on the phone and he's sobbing. He's telling me what's going on. His class was canceled. He was at University of Michigan, and he said everything's shutting down. And I thought, oh yeah, it's gotten kind of quiet. I went over into the dairy barn where the farmer and his helpers were working, and they had NPR on. They're listening to NPR. They're hearing everything that's going on, but they are going about their business very slowly. And I stood there crying, and I said, we are in the most beautiful place on earth. I just said, your work is it was just incredible. My whole experience with this dairy farm, impressed me with the fact that these farmers work 365 days of the year. If you're a dairy farmer, you don't take a vacation. You don't take a day off. 5 o'clock in the morning, the cows got to be milked. 5 o'clock in the evening, the cows have to be milked. They have 300 cows. It takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to milk 300 cows. It's pretty incredible. There's always something they've got to do. They never rush. They never run. They're never in a tearing hurry, but they never stop moving. It's pretty unbelievable. And so there I was in this idyllic place, which this painting sort of is, and yet this cataclysmic event is happening. And it's at that point that I already knew I was going to paint a big painting. I wanted to take that idea of compressing space and time and putting it into a more normative, not long and skinny, but a more normative rectangle. And I think I'm running way over time. I'm going to have to speed up. Anyway, so this is the painting that resulted. This is called the manure spreader. And this is the farm. And I had started out, when I first got to the farm, the thing I wanted to paint was this over here, which is their pile of haylage. It's fermented. It's what they do with the grass when they cut it. They put it in a big pile, they pound it down, and it becomes this, it kind of ferments under a giant tarp held down with tires. And it, frankly, what I was obsessed by was what it looked like. I loved this pile of stuff with the tires on it. I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had been actually painting these piles of gravel, a gravel pit, and they'd kick me out. They said, you can't come back. You know, we're not insured to have you here. And I was crying. I was driving home and I'd passed, and I said, I drive past this pile of tires and stuff. I have no idea what it is, but if I don't get up the courage to go to that farm and say, can I paint on your farm? I'll never do it. So I literally, I've been crying about not painting at the gravel pit. I drive up to the farmhouse door and I say, I'm Elaine, I'm a painter. I've been driving by here. Can I paint your big pile? What is it anyway? And I said, oh, I'll trade you a painting of your barn if you'll let me stand on your farm. And she said, sure, go anywhere you want, just don't get in the way. I mean, they were unbelievable. So what she didn't realize, I don't think, was that I was going to be there for 10 years. I was there, literally painted this farm for 10 years. So the manure spreader is this thing, which is, and so they down here, it's down here, it's getting filled up with liquid manure that comes from, this is the barn where the cows live. And they pump it all into this liquid slurry that is in a tank underneath the farm. They catch it, and it goes down underneath, and then they put it in this thing. And see these pipes? Those spray the liquid slurry out. Here it is down on the field, spraying this slurry on the fields. It's just an insane, it's kind of god awful and kind of wonderful. It's like an animal. So, and the manure spreader could be thought of as the man, or it could be thought of as the vehicle. The idea that the vehicle, the thing, appears 3 times, and actually it's here, it is again. It's actually 4 times in the image. Is kind of like, I'm also thinking about those paintings of saints, those Quattrocento paintings of saints, where the life of the saint's in 4 parts of the picture. Here he is, you know, being, you know, tormented by devils, and here he is in a cave, you know, and here he is performing a miracle. All of those paintings, I mean, I thought that the manure spreader was sort of like, if I show it like 10 times, it'll be like, that'll be time. But this was also, there was a period of time when I was painting this when the Twin Towers were back here with an airplane coming in, but I took it out because it just didn't work. But there is, what you can't see is there is a fisherman down here, like in the Fall of Icarus. And in here, one of the farmhands is looking up at the sky, sort of like the shepherd in the Fall of Icarus. This farmhand absolutely loved the cows, and he would go over and stand there, and they would come up and lick his hand. I mean, he just loved the cows. His name was Jaime. Anyway, so I painted that painting. This painting is 54 inches by 90 inches. It took me 2 years to get all the studies painted and to paint the thing. And it was purchased by an art collector in Toledo, Ohio. And pretty quickly, I got started going everywhere on the farm. They had me looking at that. I'd come in to inside the dairy barn. I would be watching the calves being born. I saw everything. And I kind of got obsessed with the milk truck. This is one of the paintings that'll be in that show that Scott Noel has curated called Contre-jour. And I just opened it up. Matt, I think that the last time I had opened up this painting was when you first came to my studio when it was on Upshur Street. I haven't seen this painting since then, until yesterday when I undid it to try to make sure it didn't have any paint falling off of it or anything. It's 54 inches by 90 inches. And it took me another 2 years to paint this. lots of studies. In between, I actually painted two other big paintings, one called Calving and one called Milking, which I'm not going to show. But the reason I'm showing this one is because I thought I'd show you a little bit about my process. I do a lot of studies. I just walk around. Here's a 14 by 24 inch painting of a tractor and a calf tail. This is the little fiberglass structures that they put the calves in. They separate the calves out from the herd because the most likely cause of death for calves is from disease caught by other cows, and so they have a much better life chance if they separate them out, which seems unkind, but in fact they live a better life. And here's a study of the view of standing in the barn looking out. And here's some of the drawings I did. I got real excited about doing drawings with. Normally I would draw with pencil and ink, and I got real excited about going back to using Conte crayon. This is a small Conte crayon drawing. I think this is about, oh, this one's 18 by 30. This is not terribly small, 18 by 30. And I'm just sort of seaming, I'm in different places. I'm looking at some photos that I've taken. I'm looking at sketches that I have in my sketchbook. And here's a scale drawing. This one's, this one is, where's the drawing? 27 by 45 inches. And they're just trying out what's going to be in the outside scene. This is the farmhand Fidel cleaning one of those little calf tails. They clean them between every calf. Here he is cleaning again. This is a really big drawing. This is 45 inches by 74 inches. And that's been rolled up ever since I made it. But I would put this on the wall, and I made a grid of yarn and I drew when I'm making the big painting, I put a rough drawing from this drawing onto the canvas so that I have a drawing to start from. And then I just block in big areas of color and just start painting. So there's the painting again. I'll tell you what, the most difficult thing here was how do you draw a floor which is nothing but poop, piss and poop. This is cow piss and poop. That's what that is. And they clean it twice a day. They clean it twice a day, and it ends up looking like that again. Damn. But it's so interesting. It's kind of a fascinating, just what a project. How do you paint poop? And how do you get someone to buy a painting of poop?
Can I ask a question, Elaine? Like, what do you think? And this is, I mean, I know what it means to me to work from life, but when you're doing all these studies and kind of perspectives of cows and people, and with the all the pieces that go into a final painting, what do you think the experience of spending so much time at a location? What do you think that adds to the painting overall? Like, why not just take a bunch of photos and kind of compose that way? What does the experience of being there add for you?
Oh my God. Well, because I got a pair of barn boots. See, Maria is wearing these barn boots in this painting here. You can see her boots. I had a pair of those. I'd go stand, once the cows were out of there, I'd go stand in the space to paint the space. A lot of studies are with no cows in them, just with me getting the sense of the space. Light. And also having the problem with a photograph, let me tell you, the problem with a photograph is there's all this information that has equality. And you look at the photograph and you go, oh, then there's this. I could add this. I could add that. The other thing is that the photograph is just one viewpoint. I mean, it's really monocular. And I'm totally binocular. I'm totally moving around. Also, the light changes. I want a piece of light from this moment and a different piece of light from that moment. Oh, I want. The other thing is a sense of tactile, a sense of how do you translate the stuffness? What's really, it's interesting because I actually went to the Scots lecture about Phil Geiger last weekend, and I was looking at Phil's paintings, which I hadn't seen in years. Literally, I had not seen Phil Geiger's work in years. And thinking about what separates us and makes us very different painters, I'm really interested in the stuffness of things. Whereas I want this cow to feel like a cow, and I want the poop to feel like poop, and I want the grittiness. I want I want it to have the feeling that you're literally there. I don't just want it to be a picture of the place. I want it to be the place. And I can't get that if I'm removed. I have to be in it. Um, uh, so this up here in the corner is Maria. Maria appears twice. Here she is in here milking, and here she is herding the cows in. And Fidel is here once, and then he's here again. This is Bob Brininger, the patriarch. He's the original farmer, and it's his son who really does most of the farming. I imagine Bob may not be alive anymore. But Bob was retired, and he was in the late 80s, and yet he's out there every day doing something. Every day he's out there doing something. And this is the gentleman who drives the milk truck. A little bit about the milk truck. The milk truck stems because it's so shiny. It's like a mirror, and it stems from my having read the chapter that Svetlana Alpers wrote in her book, Art of Describing, about the use of mirrors in Dutch painting. And I became kind of obsessed with the idea that you could have you could add another view of a space in by showing its mirror image in the painting. And so the milk truck had many, I mean, it was another part of describing what goes on the farm, but it was also in and of itself a visual thing that became just sort of fascinating. So it has a whole painting to itself called Milking. At this time, I had also gotten obsessed with the idea of altarpieces, and I had been to Ghent to see the Ghent and I saw the Ghent altarpiece, and I was kind of fascinated by the idea you tell a story in multiple panels, and that there's a hidden story. And I had spent 2 years painting gravel pits, which in Michigan, in that area, there's a lot of gravel mining going on, and had been for a long time. But you usually don't see the gravel mining operations because they're hidden behind farm fields. And I wanted to make a painting about that idea that this kind of god-awful thing, the gravel pit's kind of a travesty, is hidden behind something that everybody thinks is lovely, and they're going on at the same time. But the question of how you can see from the farm that the farm is not lovely. The farm is kind of its own thing. It's not a thing of beauty. I'm celebrating that, though. I'm celebrating its own strange beauty that it has, that people don't have any clue about, really. They think it's the farm is seen from the distance. It's this sort of pastoral wonder. It's not. It's something else. And I had wanted to paint, so I had actually had somebody make me a kind of folding panel thing. I didn't think a triptych was just 3 different paintings. It's actually something that folds, that has an inside and an outside. So this is I had painted a gravel pit called Killen's Concrete, not far from where I lived. And when the farm field nearby got sold and turned into a construction site to build a strip mall, I suddenly knew I had a painting. And I painted this entire thing out on site because I had the hinges could come off, and I could carry these wood panels, which are very heavy, actually. It's oak. It's an oak panel, solid oak panels, out on site and paint. And so each one of these I painted in halves. Anyway, so this is my first foray into painting a construction site. And this is the outside. This is you're looking at 18 inches by 36 inches, and it's 2 panels with an open in the center. When you open it, this is what you see. This gravel pit is Killen's Concrete, and it's a disused gravel pit, but there's a kind of concrete plant in here, and they're dumping old torn up road in there. And then these side panels are little bits of stuff, abandoned farm equipment in the woods, not very far away. This is an old Gleaner harvester, and this is an old John Deere. This little panel is called Deer in the Woods. It's a John Deere grain drill. And then on the back, that's the close-ups of again, all these panels I painted out on site. So I took them all out. And this is the back, where you can see it's opened, and you're seeing the back is the field, the old abandoned harvesters up there. This is a pumpkin field getting ready to be planted. And this is what it looks like when you open up that outside and it's flipped. So I painted this thing. It's called Land Use in Washtenaw County, and that's 2007. I'd been to see the Ghent altarpiece 2005, 2006. I think I went to Ghent. Oh yeah, that's a close up of that back panel. I'll tell you, this was hard to do because the pumpkin field was muddy and wet, and I could hardly walk across it. I couldn't walk across it. I had to walk all the way around the edge because my boots. Just getting all the painting was a trial. The thing with the clay is like clay, and I think I had about 10 pounds of clay on each boot by the time I was done. I moved to DC, and what was there paint? I'm looking around. What can I paint? What can I paint? I found some cylinders. This is the McMillan filtration plant. So the first thing that I painted when I got to DC was this. So this was 2012, and I painted there for a couple of years, and here's another painting of it. And it's really interesting. Once you get involved in a place, I can't stop being there. You'll see later that so this is I think, oh, I don't know when this is. This is like 2014, something like that. I also found the Hughes Tower, which is in Brightwood, which is at Georgia Avenue, just towards the north part of DC, north of actually you're not as far north even as the old Walter Reed, but Georgia and Quackenboss, Georgia and Peabody. And this is painting is Messages from Heaven and Earth, and it was bought by the DC Art Bank, and it's currently hanging in the offices of Councilwoman Janice George, who is the councilwoman for Ward 4, because it's in her ward. And this painting was amazing because I remember looking at this structure and thinking, I really, really want to paint it, but I don't know where I'm going to stand. And it feels a little crazy because here I am in a neighborhood I know nothing about. Is it even safe? What should I do? Then I found this very close, this community farm, one of those places where people get a plot and go do their gardening. And I can tell you, it was like, it was extraordinary. The farmers, the people doing the work were so kind to me. They would come over and chat with me. They tell me their life story. They tell me how they grew up in the neighborhood, what went on in the neighborhood. They gave me vegetables. They were amazing. So I made a lot of paintings. I have about 10 paintings of this tower from all sorts of different viewpoints, but this is the first one. And because people were so kind, I called it Messages from Heaven and Earth. It's a radio communications tower. This is the radio communication tower for all of the DC first responders, police, firefighters, etc. Here's one of the last paintings I painted of it from around the other side. This is off of Peabody, and these are kids in a little charter school or a little. They have a school across the street behind me in a storefront, I guess, and they're using this just empty lot as their playground. This is one of the last ones I painted, but I still have another couple in me, I think, but I haven't been down there in a while. Sometime around 2013, I was when I was on I had a residency at the Albers Foundation. My husband found this place in the woods in Rock Creek Park, where all the stones that were taken off the Capitol in 1958 renovation were piled. And so it's kind of like this kind of weird ruin in the woods, stacks and stacks of stones. And I started painting there. And this is a fairly recent painting. This is 2020, around 2021. But what I realized when I saw that this had pertained to the Capitol is I had another painting, another folding altarpiece in me. And I went down to the Capitol in fall of 2014, where they were putting scaffolding on the dome. And I started painting. This is painting the scaffolding. I was fascinated by the fact that this was under repair. It also gave me a latch on. I didn't want to paint a painting of one of the most known buildings in the world as just, a thing of beauty. I wanted to paint it for a reason. It had to have a meaning. in 2014, Syria was falling to pieces. Congress refused to debate anything about how Americans might get involved in that. They kept punting it to Obama. Obama would punt it back. Obama, had to, sent in drones and Congress was in recession. And I was kind of angry. There were so many things that Congress was not addressing. I was really angry. This is the House of Representatives right here. And there's nobody in there doing a damn thing. They're all back in their constituency campaigning. And so I called this painting, I called my folding altarpiece, Renovating the Capitol. Anyway, this was so much fun to paint. I had exactly one place they would allow me to stand. So that was it. I was where I was because that was where the Capitol Police said I could be, on a little piece of grass. Anyway, so that's the paint. That's the study I painted. The folding panels I had made, I have 3 sets of folding panels made by somebody that were so heavy I couldn't take them out. So this is a painting on canvas that I painted, and every day I would paint in the morning. I would go back and I would transfer the thing to the wood panel in my studio. So at the same time I was painting this, I'd paint that for 3 hours in the morning, I'd paint on that for 3 hours in the afternoon. And the interior of it is this. So a little later, I'd go in the woods. When it got, I would go in the woods and I took a big giant piece of paper. I painted a painting on paper in the woods because I had to hike a bit to get to the stones. And then the same thing, I would paint in the morning on the paper and I would go back in and I'd paint on the wood in the inside. So this painting is called Renovating the Capitol. The difference between one of the interesting things, there's a couple of figures in here that are different than in that painting. Like I added a couple people. In this one, you don't get this group of nuns. I thought they were kind of wonderful. They're walking across here. This woman, when she came through, okay, all the figures, this guy and this guy were painted from life in the one that I painted outdoors. They were there and I just put them in. The rest of the figures all get put in from photos I take off my phone. Oh, these guys were put in from life. That person was put in from life, standing with little police officers. But she walked through and I got a picture on my cell phone. This group showed up. I had been struggling with what's going on in the pediment. It kept getting too detailed, and then it would be too rough, and then it'd be too detailed, and it kept popping out of the painting. But when this tour group came and stood there with all those colors, I suddenly you can see how this sort of diagonal relationship, suddenly all these figures in color became the kind of conversation with all the figures in the pediment. And when these 2 guys showed up, I thought, oh my God, this is perfect. This guy, they clearly were, to me, I was pretty certain they were African and not African-American. Partly the clothes they wore and partly their sort of attitudes, the way they stood and the way they moved. They were not African-American men, they were African men. I thought that was kind of interesting, watching people and thinking about who they were. And my methodology for putting figures in paintings is to take photos, to go home, draw from all the photos, see if they belong. But often when I see somebody walk through painting and the place that I'm painting, I'll think they got to go in because they're wearing red and I needed red, or this person has attitude. So for instance, in this painting, this woman has serious attitude. She would walk. I'm near the Shaw metro stop, and so a lot of people are walking to and from. This is early morning on T Street. That's the Howard Theater. This is a series of buildings that are being, they've saved just the facade because the facades are historic, even though they're kind of a nothing architecturally. And they build a monstrosity behind them. It's a terrible building. People would say, oh, are you going to paint the finished building? And I would generally say, I don't think so. Anyway, this painting is from 2017. No, it's not 2017. It's 2019. One of the last things I painted before COVID hit. And it's this one is 20 inches by 60 inches. But I began to choose sites in DC where I thought that had something to do with how the city was, that I didn't know anything about the city. I wanted to show things about the city that were sort of lesser known. They were places that people lived, that people and that are undergoing real change. I'm sort of interested in places that are undergoing change, I guess. And here's one of those facades. They put this black cloth over the facades to protect them while they're digging the foundations and building. And I really thought it was kind of like a mourning veil. And I was fascinated by the facade. It was an incredible project to try to figure out how to paint that effectively as a transparent material. But the other reason to paint this view was this is during the first Trump administration, this insane mural back here, which features Donald Trump is right in here. And he's pictured as a baby bouncing a ball. And there's this kind of crazy voodoo witch doctor up here with these big hands. And it's a fabulous mural. I just adored the mural and I wanted to get it into the painting somehow. It's a crazy thing. So this painting is titled Veiled Facades with Witch Doctor. Anyway, my little hidden political commentary. And 2020 hits, COVID hits, and I'm part of Washington Interfaith Network through my faith community, which is Friends Meeting of Washington. I've belonged to Friends Meeting of Washington since I moved here. I've been a Quaker since I was in college. I became a Quaker. I searched for a faith community at the same time as I was becoming an artist. So the two things are very bound up in my head. But at any rate, Washington Interfaith Network was at the time really working on issues of affordable housing in DC. And so they were looking at pieces of public land where they could advocate for the city to require that anything built there be a third deeply affordable for people who are like work at McDonald's, a third 60% of I can't remember the acronym, but anyway, people who are civil servants, who are teachers, firefighters, that sort of thing, who could afford to live there, and a third market rate in order to stop creating ghettos in our city of different economic strata. So one of the sites was Reservation 13, which is down near where DC General Hospital was. So I thought, and one of the things they said was, because nobody can be in community with each other in a space, you're assigned to field trips, go visit all these places. So I went to visit the places and I realized that DC General Hospital was going to be a really interesting thing to paint. It was slated to be torn down. And guess what? They started tearing it down. So I started to paint them tearing it down. This is the demolition of DC General Hospital and painted in 2020 from standing in the parking lot of St. Coletta's School. Here's a little, once it got, this is a lot of it. This is them shooting water onto it. There's a big crane off the painting with a wrecking ball that hits it. And this whole thing sort of shudders and kind of collapses. And I'm trying to catch it mid-shudder. Here's the crane with the wrecking ball. At a certain point, this is all that's left. And that whole center area has filled with water, which turns green. And this little painting, when I got there and I couldn't really work on the other painting anymore because it was, it had changed so much. So I got a little canvas and I painted this little thing. This is a one-day painting. And this is about 12 inches by 16 inches. I think this is one of my favorite paintings I've ever painted. I mean, I just love this little thing. I probably will never sell it. I just love it. Something about the whole thing. And then 2020, then the January 6th riots happened and they put a fence around the Capitol. And I think the fence had been up for about a month. Oh, it was about mid-February. Things start to warm up in DC. It gets warm enough to go outside again. And I realized, oh my God, there's a fence around the Capitol. That's going to be amazing looking. This is pretty insane. So I go down and I start drawing. And I start finding, what I decided was I wanted to draw at places where you could see the Capitol dome. And that fence extended so far that there weren't very many places where you could see the Capitol when you were outside the fence. And this is one of them. This is at D Street and New Jersey Avenue Southeast. And I'm looking through an open gate where people who work in the Capitol can go through to get in, and National Guard and Capitol Police and everything. I also love this little painting. I don't think I'm ever going to sell this one. This is 12 inches by 16 inches. What was really interesting was hard to find places where I could stand, because a lot of places the Capitol Police would not let me stand. But this gentleman came over, and he wanted to make sure I was an artist. And so he said, well, let me see some of your other work. And fortunately I had my sketchbook, and I said, well, here's my sketchbook, and I paint through this, and I've drawn that, and I've drawn this. I'm not just casing the joint. But then they were okay with it. He'd come over and talk to me almost every day. This is another one from the Capitol Fence series. I'm down on the other, down near HUD, and this is the botanical gardens I'm looking into the outdoor part of the botanical gardens, and the big greenhouses to my left. And that's called the Bartholdi Fountain. Bartholdi, the sculptor who did the Statue of Liberty. I love the fountain. It's just a same nutty thing. It's kind of awful and beautiful at the same time. And here's one from in front. They had moved the fence. By then they moved the fence. This is sort of this is probably June. They'd moved the fence in, and National Guard were walking around. The National Guardsmen were put in from photos. I took a lot of photos, but the painting is painted on site. And then the fence went up around the Supreme Court the next year after Kavanaugh was threatened. He was threatened at his home, but they decided the justices weren't safe anywhere. And so I went down there to start drawing, and in March, and towards the end of April, I was ready to paint. And I only found a couple of places where I could stand. And one of them was smack up. I really could hardly move from my side. I really just had enough room to set up, and I couldn't back away from the painting, and I couldn't get around. And so but I started painting, and that was the day that the Dobbs decision was handed down. So there's actually a lot of people and a lot of noise going on while I'm baking this painting. I painted on this for a couple of days, and then I realized from my own perspective, and I don't try to dictate what people should feel or think. But from my own perspective, it hadn't been a stellar day that the Dobbs decision was handed down. So I wanted a painting where it was cloudy and grayer. So I painted this one. And then I painted this one around the other side. And this turned out to be the day I was there this painting was the day that Ketanji Brown Jackson was installed. So there's a heightened police presence the day she was installed. Tons of people, lots of police all over the place.
Could I ask about your sketches and the way that you've composed each painting either has a portal, it seems like some way in as a framing device. You have some open doors, that gate where we could see into the Capitol, or like to the path that would lead to the Capitol. And then this one has no way in, and it feels almost confrontational. And then the next slide was where there was like that police gate, right? And then that, the stop as a literal barrier. But like
I was really focused. That's a really good observation, and I really thought a lot about that. It really felt what was really appalling to me was that the place where justice is supposed to be served, where everyone is supposed to be equal under the law, is somehow closed and is so barricaded. There are so many barricades and so many, we have a barricade here in front. We have another barricade here. We have another barricade there. We have barricades here. It's so inaccessible, and it seems to me a total fail. Our whole legal system is failing. It just seemed, and even I really felt like even this little sign, which is just like a no parking sign, which I didn't put any letters on, is another kind of stop. It's another kind of like a barrier to getting in. I really felt like that's a lot what this was about, was barriers. And the travesty of the barriers that we have now had to erect around what is supposed to be access, right? It's supposed to be justice, and it just seems like there's barriers everywhere. Dark time, I thought. These are the this is the most recent. So I went back to once they started doing the construction at the McMillan site, which is where I started painting when I moved to DC. I got really interested because I love a construction site. So I have a whole series of paintings from the summer of 2023 and 2024 of them starting that project. And here's just one of them. And another. One of the interesting things is they'd completed one section, so I could, for the first time, get into the space. And I had a little painting that I'd made when I illegally walked into the space where I wasn't supposed to be, and painted a painting there where I could see the basilica and the clock and the bell tower, campanile of the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception. And I'd painted that back in, I'm 2012, and someone purchased it. But I'd only been able to paint on it for like an hour and a half before they kicked me out. And so it was kind of interesting to be able to get back. You can now walk around in one section of it because they finished the south end of this whole project, which is a park. And I painted some quite a few paintings last summer, not this past one, but the summer before from that site. I'm going to very quickly run through something. Okay, we're gonna jump back in time, and actually backward and forward in time. There was a period right before I moved to DC that I became obsessed with this map, which is Tokaido Bunkanzu, which belongs to the Library of Congress. I saw it in an exhibition at the Field Museum in Chicago, which is the Museum of a natural history, and they had a massive exhibition of mapping. And I've always been interested in maps. Maps are a kind of obsession of mine. This map is a scroll map. It's 60 meters long. And in 2009, after I'd seen the map once in 2008 at this exhibition, I came to DC to the Library of Congress, got a reader's card, and got to unroll the whole thing. And I drew from it and photographed it over a period of several days in the Library of Congress. And this is one section of, this is the end of it. This is the end. And it, actually, I'm wrong, it's the beginning because it's at the right. And I decided I wanted to make a map, and what was I going to map? And I was still living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I thought, well, I take the train from Ann Arbor to Chicago a lot because I have two brothers who live in Chicago. So I will map what you see when you take the train from Ann Arbor to Chicago. I'm compressing here. It took me a year to figure out that's what I was making a map about. But I didn't know what the form was. And it took me several years to figure out what I was going to make with this idea. And the result has been that I now, since 2009, have been traveling back to Michigan regularly every year. And I now have 30 of these large, what I call map prints. Each one spaced about 2 miles apart along this railroad route. I've been traveling from Ann Arbor westward, and I'm now in Michigan City, Indiana, at the bottom of Lake Michigan. This is the Battle Creek map, and I chose it because Battle Creek is a name that a lot of people might recognize as being the home of Post cereals and Kellogg cereals. And it's where Kellogg began. And each one of these maps has an aerial view. It has 8 small watercolors around it. It has an analog map hand-drawn by me. It has hand-drawn borders, a border around the outside and a border around the aerial map. And then this colophon kind of stays on each one. It's the title of the project, Charting the Wolverine. The Wolverine is the name Amtrak gives to that train. And then it has a little other map which sort of situates where this particular one is within a larger context along the route. So Battle Creek, I was also, when I saw that Tokaido Bunkanzu map, I thought about Hiroshige's famous 53 stations of the Tokaido Road. And he did these incredible prints, each one done in a place where people could stay when they traveled along the Tokaido Road. Tokaido Bunkanzu, the road is a famous road. It's been written about, it's in literature, etc. So, I was sort of thinking about that and the little watercolors. The idea is that I drive along the railroad track, finding places where you can see, finding places where I can stand to make a live watercolor in situ but you should be able to see it from the train. And so this is one of them. This is 5, and they're small, so they're sort of like little postcards. The idea they're sort of also like early 20th century postcards. So this is the this was a sanatorium built for tuberculosis in the early teens. That Battle Creek was known for as a space for a sanatorium, and part of that was because Seventh-day Adventists. Kellogg was a Seventh-day Adventist, very interested in health, and the Adventists have built a huge number of hospitals and medical schools around the world. This is another one of the little watercolors. The other thing was, you see that I showed you the Hiroshige print. He had things going on all times of day, all times of year. Again, that interest in time. So I make images in the winter, in the summer, in the spring. Here's one of the few that's done from a photo, people getting off, disembarking on the platform. There's a water park right next to the train station in Battle Creek. You could see it's grain elevators everywhere. Of course, I love grain elevators. This is the aerial drawing. In order to do the aerial drawings, and this is there are tons and tons of aerial maps of Michigan from the about 1870. It became a real thing to make an aerial map of your town. And I did a lot of research in University of Michigan libraries and they had hundreds of aerial maps of Michigan towns in the 1870s. And almost every town had a little map of it that somebody had drawn. And I don't think they did them from photos. They were doing them as projections. But I hire a pilot of a small plane who is also an aerial photographer. He learned how to take photographs so he could support his love of flying, and he made a career out of it. And he and I go up in this little plane, and he takes these photos for me, and then I can draw from them. I'm going to zoom in here, and you can see that here's the train station. There's where it says Battle Creek, hidden in the parking lot. There's the train station. There's the splash park. Over here is the grain elevator with the Ralston sign from Ralston Purina. And up here at the top, that's the other reason to show you this one, because so many of my images are from there. Here's that sanatorium off in the distance. I can tell you that going up in that little plane is a hoot. It is just the most fun in the world. I mean, it's just amazing. And then doing these drawings are done with Micron pen is also really kind of fabulous. It's really fun to kind of figure out how much I'm going to put in, where am I going to put the compass rose. Here it is sitting on the top of this the arena in where I don't know what goes on. Maybe I don't know what goes on in that arena, but it's like in a sports arena. And there's the whole thing again. There are 30 of these. You can see them all on my website. I think I went way over here. I'm so sorry. I may have lost everybody. Thank you so much. And here's my website, and I'm in these 2 upcoming exhibitions. And I don't know, I may have lost the entire crew.
No, you didn't. This was unbelievable. Elaine, I was thinking while you were presenting that you are an artist with a capital A, because you love every minute of this, and also you convey that love in so many media as well.
Well, I have to say that I remember a faculty person. I had a teacher I had as an undergrad named Barry Shockman, who was hugely influential. And he said, I remember he was trying to light the fire under. He said, I can't do the artwork for you. I can't light your fire. Why on earth are you even in this room? And I said, I don't know. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be. So that's really it. I just don't feel like a human being unless I'm out there doing something.
I have so many questions, but I can't even begin to ask them because it would take another hour. And I don't want to keep you. I would love to talk to you at some other point.
We can get online together and we can do a Zoom.
I would love that. Can I ask you a silly question? Like, how do you figure out the perspective, not in the maps, but in the timeline before your triptychs or your book-like works?
What do you mean figure out the perspective?
Yeah, like how do you figure out how you're going to show the different? It seems to me that there were several horizons.
Yeah, there's several horizons. Well, it's interesting because I just thought, why? I thought, okay, I've got 2 feet by 20 feet. You cannot see this all in one go, and I don't want you to. You're going to be moving. It's almost like it's as if it's a movie, only it's a still. So you're going to move. So the fact that I change what you're seeing when you're moving, it should happen. It's like
Yeah.
has shifted.
So you reserve the right to change the
And I
perspective
can move
any way
forward.
you like.
I just said, why not? Who's telling me I can't? Who's to say I can't do this? And I'll tell you what, I had an amazing experience probably somewhere around 1990. Oh, it might have been around 97. The University of Michigan Museum of Art mounted a show of Chinese paintings from one private collection. It was an incredible show of Chinese paintings in which there was a landscape scroll by some monks from around the 5th century or 6th century, Common Era. So very old thing. And in it, there's a little guy walking through the landscape, and a scroll is something that you only unroll a certain amount at a time. It's kind of like a movie. You don't unroll the whole thing. You don't see the whole thing at once. You only see it. It's a very personal experience. You roll and you unroll. And the little guy's going through, but when they showed it all unrolled, you could see that you zoom in, you zoom out, you're close, and then the horizon goes up here, and then suddenly you fall off a cliff and it's just water and you're on a boat somewhere. And I thought, they were doing this hundreds of years ago. Why can't I do it? They gave me complete license to do what I wanted. And yet I'm so bound. I recognize that I'm not, I'm not a perceptual painter, but I'm not a conceptual painter. I'm someone who's kind of trying to meld those two things together. I don't want to give up either part of it.
So Elaine, did you overlap? Obviously, Rackstraw Downs is a kindred spirit. There's
Absolutely
some similarities, just in your approach, these sustained paintings in the landscape, threading together various. I feel like before, in the earlier work, there was more invention about horizon. Some of the later work, and I've seen those. I think you called it the Humus Tower or something like that. You sort of look out at it and look up at it. It's like that blended. Are there other artists that that are working in the landscape that are that you're interested in as well, that sort of do sustained painting in the landscape?
Very few.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small group.
It's a very small group. It's really kind of, I'm astounded by, if anyone is interested in Rackstraw Downs, you should read his little journal that he wrote, that he kept of painting one painting. What's insane about Rackstraw is he'll start a painting in the spring and it won't be done till the fall. So that painting has gone through the seasons and he's painted over the weeds in the spring have become the weeds in the summer, become the weeds in the fall. And it astonishes me that he's just willing to keep changing the painting, which I'm not willing to do. I'll paint for like a month at a time and then I put the painting aside and I go back the next year. I am just trusting that it'll look enough like it next year that I'll paint on it. I'm not that, but it's what I think makes me not really quite a plein air painter, because I paint I do paint some paintings in 1 or 2 sessions, but there's very few of them. I'm much more someone who's going to go back, and I kind of want that. It ties me more, I think, to Bruegel and to someone like Rysdale or Constable, which is a much earlier painter, not a pre-impressionist painter who's in the landscape. Because I'm trying to get at a different kind of essence of things.
Yeah, like you're painting, it's about the phenomenon, but it's also about the plan.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the spatial things, but what separates me from Rackstraw is I'm not particularly I cannot bring myself to make what I perceive as a vertical from my inside, from my gut, into an angle, which is something that happens when you try to, which is much more about what happens when you try to, you're bowing space. and your perception of space as bowing. I don't perceive space like that. I'm much more, and that actually is pulled back to my love of Italian, the Giotto and the Piero, really, where everything is tied into a much more, vertical, horizontal. When I look at a vertical, it's vertical. I want it to be vertical. It drives me nuts if it's not. Um, but then that was a problem, I'll tell you, is a real problem for the Hughes Tower because where's the vertical in the painting? Well, there are two towers. There's one shorter one and one taller one. And where's the vertical? The vertical is in between the two. And I spent
and it does, Elaine, that painting, it bends. I'm so, which was the first time I sort of recognized how, that idea of there's the pictorial truth and the perceptual truth, and how do the artists really, so it's just sort of a fascinating painting.
Yeah. But Rackstraw, I can tell you, Rackstraw Downs is, for me, he came to my studio twice. He was a visiting artist twice when I was a grad student. And each time, I think, I just revere him so deeply. And yet I think he must be an impossible person. I don't know him personally. I think I can't imagine being in a relationship with the man. He must be an absolute nut job. Just how could you live with someone who is so totally, he's more obsessed than anyone I think than anyone I might have ever met.
So that drawing that was in the show years ago, Betty Cunningham said, yeah, he's not willing to give you any work for your show. He doesn't like the idea. So then I went to the National Gallery and got one on loan from the National Gallery instead. So I was like, oh, you don't want to be in the show? Sorry, you're a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an impossible dude.
I do remember reading the journal though, when they said he's just like, oh well, I have to use a bathroom, so I'm gonna go to McDonald's and I'll buy some fries just because I feel guilty for like using their bathroom. And I just
I'll
said,
tell you,
I identify with that.
It's a real big. That's actually one of the biggest problems for landscape painters is where do you go to the bathroom? And
absolutely,
yeah, and figuring that out is it's an enormous problem. But he's nuts because the other thing about Rackstraw is he starts out early in the morning. He's not done till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. How can you be out on site? I mean, I really have first of all, I can't do the bathroom thing for me really is, anyway, let's not get into that. But it's also that the light, I have a 3-hour window, and that really came from my teacher, incredible teacher in graduate school, Campbell. Why am I forgetting? But my brain just can't bring up her first name. Anyway, Gretna Campbell. Who taught me so much about painting out on site. She painted out on site almost exclusively. I don't know that she put hardly any strokes on her painting indoors. She was a brilliant painter, a brilliant person. And I don't understand why she's not on everybody's A list because she's such an extraordinary artist. Anyway, I learned a lot about she really said, maybe the first hour you're just prepping. Then there's the hour where the light is your light, and that's when you're on. And then the third hour, you're really just remembering that light. You're kind of tying together, but there's an hour in there where you're so on, you can't barely breathe. You're just, and I really took that. And so the maximum amount of time I can spend out on site really is 4 hours. But it's usually more like 3. And I'm working so hard that in that 3 hours, people come up behind me and I jump sky high. I can't, and I don't have any music or anything in my earphones. I'm just like darker, lighter, bigger, smaller, cooler, warmer, smooth, sharp, it's just all about, what color, what relationship, this mark to that mark. Anyway. So
fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I mean, it's just like I love seeing I mean, it dawned on me as soon as you showed me the Brugala or Bregel. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like, the herding cows. Like I just like saw the pathways through all the paintings. And it's like, like the compositions just keep repeating. Like I see like the connection. It's just a reincarnation in so many ways. I love it. So thank you so much. And thank you, Matt, for inviting Elaine to our program this Saturday. I want to remind everyone we have another incredible like paint. I don't even know how to describe Mark Carnes and how important he is to so many painters over the years. So Barbara Gruber, who is a past ACO presenter, is connected up with Mark Carnes, who words cannot explain him. But we're so excited to have him in 2 weeks. So make sure you come back in October for one of Maryland's greatest painters. I don't know how to say otherwise. But thank you again to everybody for being part of our program today. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Amazing. Thank
See
you.
you guys next time.
Thank you, Matt
See
and
you.
Elaine and everyone.
Thank you.
Enjoy the day.